what could really help us is transparency and paperwork. We do a lot of work trying to make sure that the COAs we're getting are not tampered with. There's a lot of COAs I feel that when we see them have been edited. So we have to verify with the labs that product is what the lab says it is. So I would love to see one source of truth. I'd love to see a tracking and tracing system similar to the cannabis industry that has full seed to sale transparency. And boy, that would make our life so much easier.
That's Kevin Schultz, president and co-founder of 357 Hemp Logistics. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today we're going to learn about logistics. What goes on behind the scenes. Kevin Schultz is going to talk about 357 Hemp Logistics, how they got started, what sorts of services they provide, the challenges they face in this industry, and, possible solutions. So, very interesting show today. Hope you enjoy it. We're going to take a quick break for a sponsor message and then come back with a few nuggets of hemp news and then talk to Kevin Schultz at 357 Hemp Logistics. This episode is brought to you in part by Impactful Ventures, an investment and incubation company focused on supporting startups and other initiatives that play a vital role in reversing the adverse effects of climate change. They strive to amplify enterprises which bring innovative green opportunities to the forefront and empower those making a significant impact for a sustainable future. You can learn more at impactfulventures.org. This episode is brought to you in part by IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where their mission is to provide innovative agricultural products and services to connect American farmers with the pioneers and businesses that see hemp as a way to bring real and lasting change to our communities and planet. IND Hemp. Hello and welcome back. So we've just got a handful of news nuggets here for you this second week of October 2022. All right, so here's something cool coming up in a few weeks in Oregon. It's a hemp feed workshop. The Global Hemp Innovation Center, Oregon State University, and the Hemp Feed Coalition have teamed up to host the first ever hemp feed workshop. This 2-day workshop will be on October 26th and 27th, 2022 at Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon, with a specific focus on bringing academics, regulators, and industry together. This workshop will strive to evaluate research, create healthy dialogue, and collectively work together to bring nutritious and safe hemp products to the animal feed market. There is a virtual component to this workshop, so you don't have to go all the way to Oregon, but if you're in Oregon, you should go to it anyway. So I'll have a link to that on the show page for this episode. All right, so moving on. Something else coming up. This is in November 14th and 15th. I've told you about it before. It's the Pennsylvania Hemp Summit. It's a 2-day event in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And we'll be talking about it more in the next few weeks. But also, I wanted to let you know that the Pennsylvania Hemp Summit organizers, Team Pennsylvania, they have partnered with PASA Sustainable Agriculture to offer a farmer scholarship for beginning and socially disadvantaged farmers who would like to attend the summit. The scholarship will cover the full cost of registration for the event. You have to apply by October 31st for consideration. So that's coming up soon, so be sure you register for the Pennsylvania Hemp Summit. I can't wait to be there. There's going to be some great speakers and some interesting educational and networking opportunities, so I hope to see you there. And finally, I want to give a shout out to the Rodale Institute for their 75th anniversary. 75 years of promoting regenerative and organic agriculture here in the U.S. and around the world. The work they're doing there is amazing. I've been to the Institute many times. In fact, the very first time I saw industrial hemp in a field growing was there at the Rodale Institute back in 2017. It was life-changing, and here we are. So yeah, congratulations to the folks there over at the Rodale Institute. All right, so that does it for the news nuggets. If you have any news that you want to share with me, please email me. Send an email to podcast@lancasterfarming.com. Not just news nuggets, but story ideas, people you think I should interview, questions, comments, concerns, any of that. Write to me. I love to hear from you. Okay, let's get into today's interview. Here we go. Kevin Schultz, co-founder and president of 357 Hemp Logistics. Welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
Doing good, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of weeks ago, I reached out to you because I saw your company's name listed on that USDA list of recipients for the Climate Smart Commodity Grants. So you're listed as one of the major partners in that $15 million grant for fiber and grain that's headed up by Iconoclast Industries. So I thought we could learn more about your role in that, but also this is a great opportunity to sort of learn about your company and what you do and sort of your role in the larger hemp space. So again, welcome.
Thank you. And thanks again for having us.
Yeah. So why don't we start with a brief introduction of you yourself?
Yeah, sure. So came from the cannabis industry. I was a part of two well-known multi-state operators that were vertical that came out of Illinois' program back in 2015-16, Verano and Pharmacan. And during that experience, I was able to touch all facets of the supply chain, from raw material to yields to packaging room to ultimately transporting product out of the cultivation centers to the dispensaries. And when the Farm Bill passed on the hemp side of the aisle and allowed for it to be federally legal to transport hemp over state lines, I saw the tremendous need for somebody who had the best interest of the supply chain to fill that logistics component. I knew we were going to be early. We were going to be therefore be the pioneers of these SOPs. But ultimately, we wanted the supply chain to have a partner that they could count on when it comes to game planning, strategy, budgeting, and ultimately shipping the product over state lines. What I also didn't see was the tools that the cannabis industry had, which was true tracking and tracing, and things like transportation manifests, relationships with law enforcement. And if you screw up on the hemp side and that THC level is above 0.3, or you don't have the paperwork properly documented while you're in transport, you're talking about drug trafficking laws. So we don't want too many of those stories on the news. So we take tremendous responsibility in what we're doing. And really that was how the company was born, out of that mission and idea.
Okay. So when did you actually start 357 Hemp Logistics?
We started it in August of 2019. So we're in our fourth year now. We launched the brand in the fall. We kind of cut our teeth at a hemp auction in Tennessee that happened in November. And then we were ready to launch the brand on a wider scale and website and all that good stuff, and COVID hit. So we had to pivot and reinvent ourselves and jumped in the PPE business a little bit. One quick story I'll tell you, we had a spray that we were trialing on our trucks to remove the smell after a hemp load. And it was a doctor who had the IP on it. It was a chlorine dioxide based product. And COVID hits and we're looking for disinfectant like everybody for our homes. And that product was one of the 300 products approved to kill COVID at the EPA level. So I threw my distribution hat back on, which was my previous life. And we went out and just stayed alive as a company and sold to different airports you'd be familiar with and schools. And it was a wild 9 months. And in the meantime, continued to build the company in the background. While reared its ugly head. So
when you were doing that, you weren't necessarily 357 Hemp Logistics though, right?
Well, we had a placeholder called the 357 Marketplace, and we weren't sure what we were going to do with it. We knew we weren't going to sell product. So we launched it on there to have an e-commerce platform where people could order the product. And now today, that's more of a shopping area for folks looking for hemp sacks and bulk bags and super sacks. So we have a great relationship. We combine our buying power, and farmers call us for products like that. So that's still up and running. And it's just a division of our company.
Okay. So first tell me the significance of 357, and then tell me, what all you do.
Yeah, for sure. So 357 was Numbers that go together in history, just looking back and, kind of, we wanted a numeric beginning to our name. 357 was part of the, building codes back in the day, how way back in time when folks were building, they used those measurements a lot. So that kind of caught our eye. When we did some branding, kind of research in the logistics industry, logistics companies tend to gear the names of their companies towards animals and different words versus numbers. So we thought we would stand out with having numerical
Okay.
numbers in front of our names, and it's done well for us. People remember it. It's different, and it's done us well.
Cool. All right. So walk me through, like, the different services you provide and, the different parts of the supply chain that you sort of interface
Sure.
with.
So we initially started the company strictly to specialize in hemp. We knew we were early though, so we had to do some other shipping of non-hemp products. So my partners who came on to start the company with me had been logistics pros for a long time. Part of some companies that they've sold a company. They've been in freight forwarding. So they had a small book of business that they were able to bring over of non-hemp products to kind of feed us while we were waiting for the hemp industry to grow up a little bit.
Hmm.
So as we started to build out the SOPs with the hemp side of the business, that entailed reaching out to each state individually, Department of Ag, law enforcement, trying to figure out what they wanted to see when we were coming through with a truck of hemp.
Hmm.
We weren't going to take the farm bill as, hey, we're here, we belong here, we can do this. We knew that there was probably going to be a little bit of extra steps that states were going to start to implement. And what we found early on was there were things like checkpoints, each route coming through to have certain licenses, using the total THC formula versus the Delta 9 formula. Back when we first started the company, that was a big sticking point. I can do this, it's Delta 9 only. And then there's states that have trained their law enforcement to truly understand the total THC formula. So there was a lot of background work that we did in that. And that's what you get when you work with us. We handle
Yeah.
all that. We have the relationships with the states, and they know we're coming through. We've always been above board with that.
Okay.
The last year, though, the PACT Act came out. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
No, tell me about that.
So the PACT Act, basically, UPS and FedEx stopped delivering vaporizers to the door and e-cig products because the PACT Act required extra paperwork to be held onto for periods of time. Things like age verification, signature of the actual person who put the order in. So all those things are extra work for FedEx and UPS, which my thought is they have enough freight. So they didn't want to slow their drivers down. So they said, we're out. So they gave the industry till April to figure out a different alternative to go direct to the consumer's door with product. So we started getting calls from tobacco companies and some of our customers further up in the supply chain that said, we need a solution to get to the door now. Can you provide that? You've been doing middle mile, first mile for us. How about last mile? And really it wasn't on our radar. So this was probably February of 2021 when we started getting those inbound calls. So we went out and built our partner network to, I guess, organically then backed us into the last mile business. So that was the kind of the way 357 Curbside was born. It's been awesome for us because we didn't realize the opportunity that's in last mile. So by having some friends in the industry that made some amazing introductions for us to get those partners on the carrier side, where we're able to bring that product now to the door. We worked extremely hard over the last year, and it's been a couple months now. We had a PR go out this morning to talk about that success this past year. And we're now doing things like food box kits and apparel and cosmetics and
Oh, wow.
different retail brands we're shipping for too. So the vaporizers and the e-cigs is part of that. And we do a lot of B2B with that, but the direct to consumer started to organically, the opportunity started to come to us. So Curbside is a very important division for us and kind of 1-2 punch with the hemp industry. And then we do a fair bit of line hauls, they call it, for companies where we're doing more of those full truckloads. And that would be our general logistics division.
Yeah. Okay. You were talking about, calling up the different departments of agricultures and having relationships with law enforcement. I remember hearing stories a couple of years ago about, like a truck would leave Oregon with legal hemp, but by the time it would get to, like Idaho, it would be illegal. Like, did you have to deal with stuff like that?
Yeah. So when we first started the company, Idaho was the big story. There was
Yeah.
a guy trucker pulled over. Everyone knew stay away from Idaho, and we did. There were some states early on that we just decided it wasn't worth going through. Um, Idaho then required the driver to sign off on a document, if my memory serves me correct, that basically says that everything previous to him picking up this hemp load was done within the law. So now you're asking a driver to sign off that he knows exactly or she knows exactly how that product was grown and it was tested the right way. And that's just too much
Right.
to ask a
That's a
driver.
big burden. Yeah.
And part of the challenge early on was, and we still to this day, is training our drivers and educating them that this is okay to ship. And here's why. And we'll hear time and time again from customers that come to us that they've had drivers turn away loads when they've shown up. And that's the difference with us. Our drivers are trained, they're educated. We're setting them up for success as if we're going to get pulled over. Things like QR codes, making sure they have the hard
Mm.
copies on them, what to say, what not to say. And we think that provides a level of comfort for these drivers to know that when we're calling on them to go deliver hemp, they're in good hands.
Right. You got their
We're,
back.
yeah, we don't work in any gray areas. There's some products we haven't shipped yet that I know the industry wants us to ship, but we're waiting for more clarity on that from the powers to be. So we're not putting them in any jeopardy, nor the company in any jeopardy if
All right.
rules are interpreted differently. So,
Yeah.
but most states are on board now. But again, you want to keep a close relationship with the states,
Right.
because things can change quick.
Do you have a big fleet of drivers?
Yeah, so we have one investor partner that came in at the beginning with us that owns about 400 assets. He's stronger in certain areas. So if we're in those areas, we try to always use those trucks if we can, first and foremost. Otherwise, it's a partner network that we've built
Okay. Yeah.
of folks who are asset based
Hmm.
and own their own trucks. There's no double brokering or anything like that. And they have control over those trucks and those drivers to make sure that the SOP is being followed.
Okay.
But it's pretty extensive. I want to say we have close to 5,000 trucks now in our network,
Oh, wow.
and
Okay.
that's including the direct to consumer fleets as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, like with a lot of hemp companies, like financial stuff has been a difficulty, and farmers trying to get crop insurance has been a difficulty. How do you deal with insurance, for your drivers or for your company? Like, what's that been like?
It's a great question. So early on, and it's a testament to my partners when we got involved and started the company. Brandon, who's one of the co-founders with me, said, how are we insuring this stuff? We're getting calls that the value of this is $250,000, and it's not in our general cargo policy. Like the policies that you get as a 3PL or an asset based trucker doesn't just include hemp derived products. That's something that you have to go apply for and be granted. So we were vetted for a few months. It was pretty intense. I think it's a testament to all of our backgrounds, especially mine coming from the cannabis industry, the medical cannabis industry, where rules had to be followed. We were granted a policy that includes everything that's derived from the hemp plant as long as it's below 0.3% THC, and also some parts of our SOP had to be tweaked to fit their liking, to make sure I'll give you one example. It has to be in a dedicated vehicle. It can't be commingled with other freight.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
there has to be locks on the doors that aren't tampered with until the drop. And, just a couple of the things that we have to follow that's a little different for that insurance to be active. And that insurance does carry over into our international business as well, too. So we include $75,000 worth of coverage complimentary. So a lot of the loads do fall into that. So there's no extra charge for it. But if it is a value above that, the customer is open to increasing the value of the policy for a small fee.
Okay. All right. You mentioned international work.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Where are you shipping to? What kind of international business do you got going on?
Extremely exciting and exciting for the whole supply chain. Really, we're starting to do some inbound shipments from Colombia to Florida of CBD isolates. We've gone outbound out of Colombia to Switzerland, to the UK, to Uruguay. Was it Uruguay? let me think back for a second here, Czech Republic.
Okay.
In some of these countries, what's interesting on the global scale is they have agreements with higher THC percents than would be allowed in the States. So we've recently shipped some CBD flower that was 0.68. So it's interesting to work in that side of the world where everything is cannabis to them. It's
Yeah.
really interesting. Outside of the industrial side of hemp, it's THC is just a threshold and a rule that you need to follow based on whatever that country is allowing in. So we've really made a big impact in the international market. My partner Jeremy's been shipping international commodities for 20 some years. He is very meticulous about our SOP. He's built the SOPs, and the companies are really refreshing for them to work with us when we're handling everything door to door, customs, narcotics inspections, the fees that they have to pay. And there's some things the customer still has to do, but we take a lot of that off their to-do list to let
Nice.
them back and work on their business. Yeah.
Cool. So you mentioned a lot about, sort of, I guess, the cannabinoid side, the vaping and the isolates and all that stuff. What kind of work do you do on the fiber and grain side? And then how does that tie into that USDA grant? Because that's what that project is about, is industrial hemp for fiber and grain.
Yeah. So industrial's just starting to really, fire up for us. I think early on folks were shipping with companies maybe they know of, or just whatever, maybe some trucks that they owned locally, which we encourage. We want the supply chain to be here in a few years. We're not expecting to go into Montana and ship stuff down to a processor in Florida over and over again. That's just going to be unaffordable. So, we really want to see the supply chain succeed. So, anytime we can encourage farmers or processors to work closer together and take that leg of the transportation, we're fine with it. There's going to be plenty for us to do. We're really excited about industrial. For us, selfishly, there's going to be just more weight being moved around. There's just going to be much more product.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit easier to ship than the CBD because you're not dealing with the THC level, but there's still a level of care that goes into and a know-how to shipping hemp. And I believe that the supply chain ultimately wants to work with their peers in the industry. And we're slowly making our way through kind of those players in the industrial side and starting to work more and more of them. But we're excited about the grant. We were invited in on that grant. In what really makes me excited is that they understood the value having somebody from the supply chain in that logistics component could bring to the grant. A lot of times in new supply chains, logistics is what we find is an afterthought. There's still, associations we join where logistics isn't even a component in the drop-down menu to tell them what part of the industry you're in. I just spoke at the Hemp Expo in Nashville, and that was probably the first time ever logistics was on the docket. So,
Right.
That was really what it was encouraging to us and made us want to be a part of that group specifically to go for that grant, because they saw the value more than just, hey, what's the price to get to A to B? It was, all right, now let's go in and let's talk about the strategy. Where are we going to place these processors? Sure, what's the budget going to look like if they're placed here and we need to transport X amount of trucks? And we can put all that together for them, and we do. But it's more of that research, that strategy, and the game planning that we're going to play a big role in as that grant and the players within the grant start to go operationally.
Okay. Let's just zoom out a little bit, and how would you describe what logistics is? How do you explain that to people who have no idea what logistics is all about?
It's a great question. You got to be able to execute. You got to be, you got to have a mindset that's centered around solving problems. We talk about it all the time, reducing error rates, which can just ultimately drive the cost back up to the consumer. You have to have great buying power out there with your partners. So we have partners like working with us because we just don't give them hemp business to ship. We give them other products that we're shipping other business. So, we build that density for these companies that might only have 1 or 2 loads a month, a quarter, and we're able to accumulate that buying power and bring on those relationships and translate those relationships back to a farmer, for example, that's not going to ship a lot of things, so you're kind of in that group purchasing at that point. So, but logistics for us is we see a lot of companies come to us, and when they talk through how they're currently handling their logistics, they're spending somebody in the company is spending so much time worrying about logistics, whether it's on hold with FedEx, we heard the other day, for 4 hours,
Oh.
to tracking packages on their own. We do all of that for you. So we're in the middle. We handle the complexity. You have one point of contact. That's us. We're then on the back end handling, the carrier side of things, and streamlining those conversations as like kind of a conduit in the middle. We work a lot with our customers on budgeting and game planning. So when customers are deciding to invest in different processing centers or invest in different companies, even, what is that cost going to look like when it comes to logistics? So when someone calls me and says, what's the rate from A to B, I still it kind of jerks me a little bit, because I say, wow, there's just so much more to that, especially in the hemp industry. Not one load has ever really been the same. So, and especially with rates fluctuating so much in transportation as it is, that's really hard to have a rate sheet. That's not the kind of company we are. Everything's customized. Sure, we'll get in a groove with somebody, and if we're doing things over and over that are very similar, we can get really close every time on price. But we look at ourselves as more of a partner, truly treat us as a partner, put that logistic onus on us, and ultimately go back to working on your core business, and we'll handle it for you.
Okay. Yeah. How are you dealing with, like, gas prices are going way up and the whole thing? Do you have plans to like move a fleet to some kind of renewable fuel source at some point, or is that like pie in the sky?
Really that's on our partners. A lot of the partners who own their own trucks, I know it's top of mind for everybody. Unfortunately, it seems to go up and then come down and then go back up. So, one thing we all hope for is consistency. I mean, we all want lower prices, but I think it's those, sudden increases that really throw off. You can't really budget for those. We do our best to keep pricing, where it is as far as what the market's commanding. We never add more margin because we're shipping hemp. That's been from day one. My message to our guys is, listen, you are not going to make double because you're shipping a new commodity and take advantage of our supply chain. And there's some folks that said, all right, then we're not shipping hemp. We think it's something that's higher risk and it takes more love and care and handling. So we want to charge more. And our message to our trucking partners is, no, that's not how this is going to go. We're in this for the long run, and the margins are going to be the same whether you're shipping pallets of stone or pallets of hemp. And those are partners we seek out to work with. So
that's great. That's what the industry needs, just to be treated like, regular stuff, Yeah.
Unfortunately,
normalize it. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's people taking advantage of it out there.
Yeah.
No.
Right. Are there any like particular pain points that you deal with that you think could be addressed legislatively? And I guess I'm sort of like getting close to asking a farm bill question.
Yeah. The big one that comes to mind for me is in processed oil. We cannot function properly as a supply chain, hoping that everybody within my state boundaries has every component in the supply chain that I need. So if we have somebody who buys biomass and we ship that biomass from Illinois to Tennessee, and they convert it into crude oil, and that crude oil now is concentrated. So it's went from 0.28% to 1.2%, but it's going back to a licensed processor for further remediation. We have alcohol going all over the country at all times that would never be served in a bottle that you would buy at a bar. We cannot find anything that's written in stone that said that is not drug trafficking. We support the fact that should go from licensure to licensure. Mm-hmm. It's going to be further remediated. We have the paperwork to support that flour started out less than 0.3. We're not doing anything funny here. We will get requests for crude that's 6%, and we know that flour started hot. Being from the cannabis industry, that's really hard to pull the wool over our eyes on stuff like that. But we can't find where one sheriff might not pull us over and charge us with drug trafficking. And do we think we would eventually be okay? Sure, but we're going to be telling that story in court, and that's going to cost everybody a lot of money. So we know that product's being moved. We're not moving it. We're cheering for people that are taking that risk. But I'm really hoping in the next farm bill that we have something in writing that says you can do this. Here's what we want to see as far as the logistics company having on file to make sure we can look back at the history and know that this product is legal to be moved,
Mm-hmm.
and it will be further remediated. So that's the biggest one. That is we field at least 4 or 5 calls a week, I would say, on that topic.
Okay.
And so that's something we would like to see for sure.
Do you think there's people out there, from the industry, either lobbyists or lawmakers, who know about that pain point and are working
Yeah.
towards a solution?
So I just recently got on the board for the Tennessee Hemp Alliance, and we were
Okay.
just talking about this on a call recently, a board meeting that we had, and apparently that is part of the language that's being presented for the 2023 Farm Bill.
Oh, good. Okay.
That Farm Bill is rumored though to be coming out the end of 2023. So that's a lot of crude that's still getting moved around in a gray area.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to move it. I'd love the revenue. I'd love to help those customers. But right now, the only possibility of us ever moving it is if we get approval from each state we're going through. So there is some situations where if it is a short trip, that we will reach out to our contacts in those states to see if we get a one-time exemption.
Okay.
And if we can get that, we will move it.
Yeah.
But we really need to get that in writing before we're taking off with it.
Have you had like run-ins with law enforcement? Like, can you tell some stories where, I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to. I mean, if that's
No, that's
too.
fine. Luckily, the stories have all ended well. We've probably been pulled over, gosh, 8, 9 times, I would say. Gotten off every single time. We prepare our paperwork and train our drivers as if we're in court.
Yeah.
We take it extremely serious. More is better to have on the drivers. QR codes getting to a secure cloud-based drive that has the paperwork as well. Phone numbers for that law enforcement officer to call. Our operations team is always available 24/7, to make sure if we got someone en route that if they need to get on the phone and talk to somebody, they're available. But I think what would help, going back to your question previous and kind of tying into this topic, is
Mm-hmm.
what would really help us is transparency and paperwork. We do a lot of work trying to make sure that the COAs we're getting are not tampered with. There's a lot of COAs I feel that when we see them have been edited. So we have to verify with the labs that product is what the lab says it is. So I would love to see one source of truth. I'd love to see a tracking and tracing system similar to the cannabis industry that has full seed to sale transparency. And boy, that would make our life so much easier, to be able to just log on, know that the states are behind or the federal, powers to be support this platform. And you call me with a load that you need to move, and I could just go on there and get the paperwork with an ID number of some sort. That would take so much risk off the table.
Wow.
And so much legwork that we have to do. And, I think of the blockchain, we're talking to a company at the moment in one of our favorite labs to see if we could put together a blockchain shipment where everything from the beginning was on a blockchain, and we know that nothing's been tampered with. So those are the two biggest challenges from us that I see for us in logistics, but more so for the whole supply chain to really, get moving here.
Right. With the COAs that you can tell have been tampered with, it's like I'm picturing like a report card where somebody makes like the F into an A or something. Is it that obvious? And what do you do when you see these like forged documents?
Really, JP, who runs operations, is better at it. He's got a better eye. He
Yeah.
sees a lot more labs than I do. But Adobe, folks can use Adobe to tweak things. Sometimes you'll get a lab that is over the THC threshold, and then a second lab comes through right away, and you're kind of going, well, why wasn't that the first that was sent? And
Right.
And as more pros come in the industry, we see that much less than we did when we first started, when a lot of brokers were involved. But there's a certain amount of trust that we do have to kind of, hope that folks have the best interest of the supply chain in mind. But we do our best to sniff out, the bad players and ultimately share that with the rest of the industry, because we don't want those players messing it up for all of us.
Right. Getting back to, your drivers getting pulled over, how do the cops know Like, is there a big pot leaf on the side of your truck? I assume there's not. Like, how do how do they know that? I mean, is it just sort of, I don't know, not accidental, but just like coincidental? Or how do they
Yeah,
discover that you've got hemp on board?
I mean, trucks get pulled over all the time for different reasons, and it's not, the officers in the car next to it and smells
Mm,
cannabis, because I mean, hemp does smell similar. Sometimes it happens at way stations,
mm,
where normal searches,
yeah,
random searches, maybe the driver for whatever reason gets pulled over, maybe they were doing something wrong on the road, and what are you shipping? And a lot of times the officer doesn't even go into the back, if you have your paperwork aligned with what
hmm,
they're looking for and trained to look for, there's no reason to go any further. But we just got to make sure everything's labeled properly, assuming that officer's going to go in and look around and just really have nothing to hide.
right.
And there's so much we can control, and we try to just make sure we dot all our I's and cross our T's, as long as the product is what they said it was when we were shipping it,
Right.
we should be good.
Cool. All right. It sounds like you sort of like just take people's headaches away from them, and you just make things easy for people. So
It's like
that's
it's like
good.
it's like a referee in sports. If you don't know the refs there, they probably did a pretty good job. But if all you're talking about is the referee the next day, they probably blew a call, right? So logistics is sometimes a thankless, job,
Right.
because everyone assumes it should go perfect, and when it does, a lot of times behind the scenes there was a lot going on to make that go smooth.
Right.
But that's our job. We take it extremely serious, and that's why a lot of our business is referral. People enjoy working with us overall, the customer service, and
Cool.
definitely part of getting things from A to B safely is a big part of it, but also that experience, working with your peers in the
Right.
supply chain.
Right. Best way for people to get in touch with you, learn more about 357 Hemp Logistics.
Yeah, I mean, you could always call us. We're a phone call away at 844-357-SHIP, which is 7447. Our website is www.357company.com. You can always reach out to me. I take all the first calls when it comes to hemp. I personally want, to know your story. I want to know what your service needs are, and your requirements are. Tell you a little bit about us. I think it's important that folks know we come from the industry. We're not just a trucking company trying to drive revenue and ship something new. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think as we're building this supply chain together, I think it's important to know that we took this leap of faith from other jobs and careers to personally start this company for the supply chain. And that tends to resonate. And then my background in cannabis, understanding what farmers are going through, understanding yields and all facets of the supply chain, makes feel a level of comfort that I don't think you get with other companies. So they're welcome to email me at kevin@357company.com. You can go in through get a quote on our website too, and I'll be the one that'll reach out and we'll chat, and then we pass you on to our ops team, and JP will onboard you and a little bit of vetting to make sure you're somebody that we want to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can dive into things like pricing and moving a load together.
So why is hemp important to you? Why did you go from those other industries and turn to the hemp industry?
Well, I saw the cannabis industry before it became what it is today. And early on, a lot of the programs that we were approved into were pilot programs. So you had to prove yourself before the state was going to say, okay, let's do this. There was a lot of money at stake. There was a lot of people's, careers on the line. A lot of people that left other careers to a not so popular new industry. And I think back to those days when edibles were kind of the one product you hope didn't end up in a kid's hands and ended up on the news, and now all of a sudden states are backing out of the pilot program. And I think it's very similar with logistics in my mind on the hemp side, that if you're going to move hot product over state lines and you're going to end up on those news stories, one you mentioned earlier, there's been several others. The more of those happen, the more of a black eye I think the whole industry gets. And this farm bill, there's a new version coming out. And I think we got to be very careful to play outside the lines in those gray areas. As much as it would help business continue to function and revenue driven to these companies, I get it. but we're still early on, and there's a long road to this industry. And I'm extremely passionate about what we do in logistics because of that. So, my passion is I see how much good cannabis did for people, when we started those companies. And I see a lot of similarities with hemp, especially on the industrial side. Like, so many wonderful things and ways for farmers to generate new revenue, and, everything from foods to medicinal to building supplies and fibers. It's really just an amazing plant. And I think it's part two to what we started in cannabis. So just think it's just a win-win for everybody that's going to be a part of it. But we really got to work together to get us a few years further in to really get that momentum, so we don't get stalled here early on. And truly, to not get stalled, you need those pioneers that are willing to maybe not make the money early on to, drive this industry forward, those true pioneers. And we consider ourselves one of them in that logistics component.
Cool. Well, what's next for 357 Hemp Logistics?
Right now, international. It's really blown up in a good way. We really got a solid SOP, and those SOPs change depending on the countries we're going into, but we feel like we're making folks' lives a lot easier, and there's a lot of product moving around internationally. With hemp domestically, industrial, that's next. We see a huge opportunity there for the whole industry. We see a lot more weight getting shipped around the country. Opportunities for us to truly be partners and, build out those SOPs and help folks with budgeting and then ultimately the grant too as well. Hopefully that's the first of many that we could be a part of. Mm-hmm. But I think those three is what's next for us on the hemp side of things.
All right, cool. Well, Kevin Schultz from 357 Hemp Logistics, thank you for talking to me today. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was wonderful.
All right, there you go. Kevin Schultz from 357 Hemp Logistics. I'll put a link to their website on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. I will also have the links to the news nuggets, that hemp feed workshop in Oregon and the PA Hemp Summit, and a story about the Rodale 75th anniversary. So anyway, just a note on next week's show, there isn't going to be one because I am taking the week off. It's my birthday next week and taking the week off. So there you go. Anyway, my name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Check us out online, get a subscription, sign up for our newsletter, all of those things. You can do that at lancasterfarming.com. All right, until next week, I will see you in the newspaper.
Industrial hemp.
This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2022 by Lancaster Farming newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written, recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.